Hey everyone, this video is going to cover constructors, and before you watch it, make sure that you watch the previous video on objects and classes, and also make sure that you've gone through section 7.6 in the book. Constructors are just a special type of member function, and we use them to initialize data within objects as soon as an object is created. If you remember from the last video, I made a house object called home, and I set the number of bedrooms in that house to some number and then printed it out. But what happens if I don't set that number of bedrooms, and I just try and print whatever values in there when the object is created? Turns out we get garbage. The reason we get garbage is because these variables are never initialized, they're only declared. Now when you write your classes, one of the things you should think about is that your object should be usable out of the box. So when I create this house object here, I shouldn't have to set the number of beds myself or set the number of bathrooms myself. I should be able to call getNumBeds and get some sort of reasonable answer. I shouldn't get garbage like we just did. In order to do that, we use constructors. And so a constructor is a member function. We don't need to list a return type. It just shares the same name as your class, but then it has parentheses like a function does. When the constructor has no arguments in it like this, it's called a default constructor. And so the function definition for the constructor is going to look like this. We don't need to put a return type, so we just say it belongs to the class house. The function's name is also house. So we have a default constructor which belongs to the class house. And so we'll say that by default that the number of bedrooms in the house is going to be 2. The number of bathrooms is going to be 1. And the street name is going to be my street. And when you write your constructors, it's important that you initialize all of the data in the object. So you wouldn't write this constructor and just set numBedrooms to 2. You need to make sure that all of the data is initialized within the object. So now that we have this constructor, as soon as we declare this variable here, this constructor is called so that home has these values stored in its variables. So now when I run it, see that I didn't have to set anything, and just by default this house has 2 bedrooms. But say that I need a house object which needs 4 bedrooms, and I know that from the get-go. I don't want to declare the variable and then call setNumBedrooms and say I want to change it to 4. So one of the things we can do is called Constructor Overloading. So I can put here another constructor, and we're going to say that this one can be used to set an initial value for the bedrooms variable. And so we'll say this constructor takes an int, and we'll just call this int numBeds. And then in house.cpp we'll come, and again there's no return type, belongs to the class house, and the function name is also called house, but this function takes an int argument called numBeds. And so this constructor is going to set the numBedrooms member to whatever the user passed in. So we'll set it equal to numBeds, and the rest of the stuff can be the same. So now, if I know from the get-go that I'm going to want a house object with 4 bedrooms, you kind of treat the variable name like the beginning of a function, so you add a parenthesis after it, and I'm going to say it's going to come with 4 bedrooms by default. So let's run it. And there you go. So when this variable is declared and we pass in that 4, this constructor is called because it knows, hey, I've got a constructor which takes an int. I need to call this constructor instead of the one that takes no arguments, and so it'll set the number of bedrooms to whatever the user passes in. And finally, we can do this for all 3 members. So we can have one more constructor, which takes an int for the number of beds, an int for the number of baths, and a street name. So now when this constructor is called, that's why I'm getting an error. That's better. So now when this constructor is called, it'll take each argument and assign it to the relevant field within the house object. So now I can say, I not only know that I want 4 bedrooms, but I want 2 bathrooms, and I'm going to live on my street. Okay. So I'm going to fast forward and write some more getters and setters real quick, so we can print this object out and see what's what. Alright, so I just wrote 2 functions real quick. That'll get us the number of bathrooms and the street name also, so that now we can print all this information out. Okay, so I passed these 3 values in, and the object is ready to go. And I didn't have to set anything manually. And we can see that the house has 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and it's on my street. Thanks for watching.